Hi, everybody. Welcome to class this week on our continuing course, basically the second class, and basically getting into the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of the course on the two truths. And it's sort of a brief presentation, I guess you could say. I'm not a scholar, so fairly introductory look at two probably the most influential views on the two truths, or the nature of ignorance and wisdom, nature of conventional ultimate truth, the nature of phenomena and emptiness in Tibetan Buddhism. The view posited by the founder of the Gelugpa school, Tsongkhapa, and view posited by Gorampa, who was a very famous Sakya scholar who came after Tsongkhapa is quite critical of his position, and Gorampa's position was very influential, in particular starting in the 19th century with the birth of the non-sectarian or non-allied Rime movement. And to this day, in a lot of ways, these two great scholar yogis sort of are the fountainheads of two different approaches to understanding emptiness and relationship between emptiness and conventional reality in Tibetan Buddhism. Pardon me. So just teaching here from Korea in my hotel room. I'm sorry if I've got kind of morning voice, jet lag voice here. I sound like a frog. I've been to Hong Kong twice, back and forth between Hong Kong and Vancouver. Now I'm in Korea, and I go back to Vancouver, then to Nelson. So can't wait to get home. But it's you can see it's dawning out here. Been up for a couple hours, jet lag, and anyway, I don't know if it was that or good Korean soup last night, but I'm just kind of I sound like a frog, so sorry about this. But anyway, so let's get started. And today's class is going to be on the relationship between the two truths. So I'm just going to be giving some teachings just from my notes from this great book on the two truths debate. Okay, so starting with the Heart Sutra here, homage perfection wisdom, the Blessed Mother. Thus I have heard at one time the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgiri in Mass Vulture's Mountain, together with a great assembly of monks and nuns and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. That time the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration of countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. That time also Superior Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of the great beings, looking perfectly past profound perfection of wisdom, looking perfectly also at the five aggregates being empty and inherent existence. Then through the power of Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Superior Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of the great being, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to engage in the practice of profound perfection of wisdom? Thus he spoke, and Superior Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of the great being, replied to Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage wishes to engage in the practice of profound perfection of wisdom should look perfectly like this. Subsequently, looking perfectly and correctly also the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence, form is empty and emptiness is form. Emptiness is none other than form is none other than emptiness. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, this all phenomena are emptiness, having no characteristics, not produced and do not cease. No defilement, no separation from defilement, have no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tactile object, no phenomenon. There is no I element, so forth, up to no mentality element, also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging death, no exhaustion of aging death. Likewise, there is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no exalted awareness, no attainment, also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and abide in the profession of wisdom. Their minds have no obstructions and no fear. Passing utterly beyond perversity, they attain the final nirvana. Also, all Buddhas relied perfectly in the three times, having relied upon the profession of wisdom, became manifest complete Buddhas in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of profession of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, unsurpassed mantra, equal to the equal mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since this not false, should be known as the truth. Mantra of profession of wisdom is proclaimed, Tayantam Gata Gata Paragata Parasamgati Bodhisoha. Shariputra, bodhisattva, great beings, should train the profound profession of wisdom like this. Then the Blessed One arose in that concentration, said to Superior Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, that he'd spoken well. Good, O son, just like that. Since it's like that, just as you have revealed, in that way the profound profession of wisdom should be practiced, and the Tathagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, then the Shariputra, Superior Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva, the great being, to our circle of disciples, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, demigods, and spirits, were delighted and highly praised what had been spoken by the Blessed One. So let's just take a moment just to take refuge in the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So we can just say, I and all sentient beings to achieve enlightenment go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And again, just thinking of the Four Noble or Four Arya Truths here: true sufferings, true origins, true cessations, and true paths. To overcome all the suffering we have of old age, sickness, suffering, and death, we are looking at understanding the Buddhist path in the sense of Buddha teaching the origins of this, that this comes from all grasping at self-existence and the self-cherishing that comes from, create all the suffering in the world, and that there are true cessations, that if we karmically cut these wrong views and wrong actions based on this ignorant view of things, grasping at sort of inherent existence, that things are not in a relationship to anything else, at this point, we can basically turn off the suffering. And how do we do this? By doing the true paths, the Eightfold Path, all the teachings of Buddha. So as Atisha, famous teacher of great Indian teacher who brought Buddhism, sort of second wave of Buddhism in Tibet in the 11th century, says that Buddha is the doctor, the Dharma is the medicine, and the Sangha, our religious community, is kind of like the nurses or helpers or attendants. So taking refuge is sort of therapeutically using the medicine of Dharma to cure our sufferings. So again, that's what we're taking refuge in, refuge from suffering in, the only thing that really, really helps. In particular, Dharma being the medicine, the therapy, which is the wisdom realizing emptiness that relieves all of our suffering. The Buddha's example teaching this, who's realized this, and our community help us to go on this path ourselves and realize it ourselves. Excuse me. Now then, setting our intention with bodhicitta, may everything we do be done from the perspective or motivation, intention of great compassion and love. May everything we do be put towards the awakening, the enlightenment, the liberation of suffering of all sentient beings. May we attain enlightenment, that we lead all sentient beings to that same state. Let's do 3 Gate mantras here, just for blessings of Prajnaparamita, Buddha's goddess of wisdom, to sort of study our little class today. So we go Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisoha. Okay, asking for blessings by our teachers and all the Buddhas that we study our material today. Let's do the best we can here with it. Okay, so this chapter, if you look at the book, the second chapter is what they call the relationship between the two truths of conventional ultimate reality, between conventionally existing things and emptiness. So the question is, what is the basis of the division of these two truths? Okay, so we need to have the precise identification of this base of division, and this is the crucial question for both of Tsongkhapa and Gorampa. Okay, so for Tsongkhapa, he has to maintain the compatibility or interdependence between conventional and ultimate, between these two things that are divided, where Gorampa actually wants to show the split between these two. So you can really see the opposite agendas here for the most part. Gorampa wants to maintain the irreducible difference between these two things, conventional and ultimate reality. So Tsongkhapa says, objects of knowledge constitute the basis of division. Okay, so in other words, how we know both of these two truths is what accounts for the division, or how they're different. Okay, So this basis is grounded on the empirical given phenomena, whereas Gorampa, mere mind, or the mind itself, constitutes the basis of this division. So basically, for Gorampa, this division is grounded on two different ways of looking at the matter. And these two different perspectives are incompatible, right? So black and white, up and down, or whatever. There's two different ways of looking at things, and they're oppositely, or they're opposed. So the question is the way the two truths are related. So Tsongkhapa says the two truths form a single ontological identity with two different conceptual identities. So it's one thing that you can look at in two different ways. So it's like a coin. There's two sides to the same coin, right? It's one object, you could say, one kind of existence, but again, two ways of looking at it, and these ways are interdependent. So Gorampa, the two truths are separate in a way that is incompatible with their unity. Okay? So the Tibetan here is Nobo Gig, which means one entity or one thing. Okay. So, Tsongkhapa is the underlying assumption the two truths is one entity or one thing or one phenomenon. Nokbo does not mean a thing. So Nokbo here in the Tibetan sort of connotates, or the meaning of that word is identity, nature, property of a thing, or mode of being. So the term you get here in the philosophy a lot is dopa tadad, which is an isolate or distinguisher. So I guess you could say the Nokpo here is the thing, and then the way of knowing the thing is dokpa tadad, which is George Dreyfus says, in other words, it's conceptual identity. So the sentence you get here is Nokpa gig la dokpa tadad. I'm terrible way of pronouncing Tibetan here, which is a single ontological entity with different conceptual identities. That's the way that Tsongkhapa wants to look at it, okay? So again, we can take this a little further. So the question is, because of this, are there two truths? Okay, so this is when we start going a little deeper here. If there's one thing that you can look at it in two different ways, are there really two truths? Are there really two things? It would seem to be a monism here. If there's one thing, but you can look at it in two different ways, are those two different ways really separate? Are they two different things here? Okay, so Tsongkhapa argues that there are two truths, even though there's an sort of ontological unity, and there's actually two things here, and that this is coherent. But of course, Gorampa is like, well, basically, if there's one thing, then there's not two truths. It seems to stand to reason here. The two truths are distinct and incompatible, and one's true and one's not. So there's only one truth, right? Basically, you split it between ignorance and truth. In other words, what's wrong and what's right. So there's only one thing, and that's what's right, because what's wrong doesn't exist. It's not there in the first place, right? So that's how Gorampa sees it. I think he sees it as actually kind of a simple thing, right? But Tsongkhapa, again, being a Galupa, I'm going to sort of weigh in a little bit here because I think he's just so wonderful. But anyway, not to take sides, because I think they're just absolutely amazing. And you can see the benefit of having both of these positions. Tisha always says, of course, that, Dharma is medicine, and people have different medicines for different ailments and need different medicines, different medications based on their body types or whatever else. And one medicine doesn't work with some person, another medicine work with the other person. So we need these two views of emptiness in a lot of ways, pedagogically or rhetorically, based on different people's practice and their interest in their styles, right? But I like Tsongkhapa's one, just saying my own personal bias here. So Tsongkhapa, the basis for dividing the two truths, again, is the objects of knowledge. The two truths relate to two different objects of knowledge. Again, two different ways of seeing the same thing here. So Tsongkhapa, whenever you read his books, one of the things that makes him great, he was a really good scholar and a really good academic, is that he always looked at sources. Like whatever position he liked or tried to argue for, he always looked for the basis of it in either Buddha's teachings or famous saints commenting, like people like Nagarjuna or Sangha or Chanakirti or anyone else. And Tsongkhapa, not that he didn't rely on Tibetan sources, but he was a little like, that's why it's kind of inaccurate to call him kind of like a Tibetan Luther. I mean, the early Tibetologists wanted to do that because they want to find sort of a European or Christian analogy for it. But of course, Luther tried, in being the Protestant Revolution, grounding everything in the Bible. Tsongkhapa always wanted to ground everything in the Indian sources. In other words, let's not have a bunch of Tibetans here. We're all giving our own opinion and writing our own books and referring to one another. Tsongkhapa is like, whatever we're saying, let's try and find the evidence for this in Buddhist teaching. And if not in Buddhist teaching, then the great saints that we all agree with commenting on Buddhist teachings, right? Like, again, Nagarjuna, um, Asanga or Shanti, all kind of the classics, so to speak, right? That we can look at. So again, the Catholic tradition would be like, okay, we can look at the Bible. We can also look at St. Augustine's or St. Thomas Aquinas or people like this that we all agree with. They're the basis of our tradition, right? So he quotes first of all Buddha's the Pita Putra Samgha Sutra. What is it? Pitra Putra Samagama Sutra. That's how you pronounce it there. And the quote is Buddha says himself, the Tathagata understands both the empirical and ultimate for objects of knowledge exhaustively, comprise conventional and ultimate truths. Besides, the Bhagavan perfectly sees, perfectly understands, and thoroughly actualizes emptiness. Because of this, he is described as mystic. Another quote, the knower of the universe taught these two truths without hearing from others. There is the empirical and likewise the ultimate. There can never be a third truth. Therefore, the object of knowledge is an object that is cognizable. Right? So this is what you, from based on these two quotes, what you fall from. Tsongkhapa is this definition from Buddha captures anything knowable in the broad sense. So Buddha maintains the knowledge of the two truths to be necessary for enlightenment, and understanding the two truths constitute an exhaustive understanding of all objects of knowledge. That's why Buddha says you've got conventional and ultimate, and you don't need anything else. There isn't anything else. It encapsulates everything. So these two things go together here. Tsongkhapa and Gorampa, the doctrine of the two truths, is pedagogical. But Tsongkhapa is more than this. So it's not just more than a teaching. From Tsongkhapa's point of view, it reveals every empirically or conventionally given phenomena possesses two natures, the empirical and the ultimate. One is deceptive or false, and one is true or non-deceptive. So for Tsongkhapa, it's not just rhetoric or teaching or a method. For him, it's actually claims about the world. And so this is why it's important, because the rhetoric, Buddha's teachings, actually grounded on things we can check about the world, empirical things. We can, just like Buddha's famous quote that we can test gold by burning it, biting it, testing, making sure it's real gold. In other words, we can find evidence. We can have a skeptical mind, and we can prove things on a certain level, right? Empirically and pragmatically. We can do this because the true truths are actually grounded in the world. There's something we can find evidence for. They're not just, again, like I say, rhetoric or, pedagogical way of teaching, sort of a figurative or analogous way or metaphorical way of teaching things. Like, let's say, using stories. Like if you read the Bible, a lot of the teachings, let's say in the Old Testament, given through stories. You could even argue that two Hindu classics like Mahabharata and the Ramayana are stories. They're religious stories, and then you find the meanings in the stories. For J. Tsongkhapa, he says that Buddha is actually really making claims, empirical claims that we can test to ground his teachings. And the good thing about this is it allows you to believe it because you can test it yourself. It's not just a question of believing a story, trying to interpret what he's saying as a story or metaphors or rhetoric. You can actually just look at your own experience and see how this works. So for again, Tsongkhapa, ontology and conceptuality are interdependent and mutually supporting, right? In other words, things in the world and how we know them, of course, go together. How are they supporting? A single ontological identity appears to cognize and conscious, or the knowing consciousness, deceptively and non-deceptively. While two natures belong to the same ontological identity, they are conceptually or epistemologically exclusive. The mind that verifies deceptive empirical nature doesn't have a direct access to non-deceptive nature, and vice versa, by perspectives of observing consciousness. Okay, so this is as close as the little note here from the writer here, Sonam Thakchoe, where he says this is as close as the groups come to defining two truths as perspectives. So what we're getting here, one more point here. Two types of verifying consciousness do not imply different individuals. A single cognitive agent can verify both truths. If two verifying conscious belong to two different individuals, empirically valid conscious for ordinary beings and ultimately valid consciousness. For an Arya being, which is what Gorampa says, then two verifying consciousness conflict with each other. Former is ignorance and latter is wisdom. So for Tsongkhapa, two verifying conscious are on equal footing. They belong to the same agent in spite of different roles. They are mutually entailing. You have to realize this mutuality to realize the two truths. So basically what Tsongkhapa is getting is that any object of the mind has two different, I guess you could say, perspectives, two different ways of looking at it, a conventional way and an ultimate way, but they're actually mutually entailing, okay? So conventionally, things have an ultimate nature, right? So I can look at things conventionally where basically, like I said right here, we can mind that verifies the seven pure nature. Okay, let me see here. My note here. Okay, deceptively, non-deceptively. So what's interesting is what we can say, what Tsongkhapa says, is that things on a conventional empirical level appear to be self-existent, separate from the mind. They appear to stand on their own or look like a substantial thing. But when we look closer and investigate them, we see that they're dependent on how we label them, that they're changing, they're interdependent, they're related to other things. So you can see that within the nature of a conventional object itself, it has an ultimate nature or an empty nature, right? So what Tsongkhapa is just two ways of validating this, in the sense that on a conventional level, things look that way, we can use them, they appear to be separate from us, they appear to have their own functioning or whatever else. That's kind of like the normal everyday way or conventional way of looking at things. But if we look closer, and so in other words, on a valid level, as we're just going about our day-to-day self projects, everything kind of works. We just kind of take things for granted as being there, right? But the point is, when I look deeper or investigate deeper, more from an ultimate point of view, I see that they're not really there in the way they show themselves to be, right? What they're claiming to be isn't what they are, which is why they're deceptive. Whereas what Tsongkhapa says is that ultimate existence or emptiness is what it is, right? It's not appearing in a way that it's not. It is what it is. But again, they go together, right? The river looks the same. I'm walking by it every day, walking my dog. Oh, that's the river, the Fraser River, or something like that, or the Red River in Winnipeg, or whatever. I mean, river here in Seoul, I can't remember his name, just one down there. It's the same river. We can talk about it. Seems independent of me, the way we talk about it or anything else. But when I actually start looking, well, what is that river? Where is it? What is, we start to get in terms of different concepts of it. We see that how it's related to how we think and talk about it. And an ultimate level, what is it apart from all those things? Nothing, no thing. It's empty, right? But again, we're not splitting those things up. They mutually entail each other. However, from Gorampa, that we'll see is these two verifying consciousnesses, the conventional one and the ultimate one, conflict, so they'd have to be separate in Gorampa's point of view, right? One's a thing, one's no thing. So they're separate, right, for him. So there's the two different things. So what Gorampa, again, it's, he's a very, very brilliant man and not a dummy with this. How does he come to that perspective? Like maybe we're a little bit used to at least being Galupas, when you're studying all this stuff on emptiness, independent origination. Yeah, I've kind of heard this. I know what we're talking about, but it seems kind of obvious. But whereas, we don't want to take the cartoon, stupid version of Gorampa's point of view, right? We want to sort of understand a little deeper. So where does he come up with this kind of interesting idea? He has. Well, he says there's the four bases of the division of the two truths. And this is actually quite famous. His 4 points or 4 divisions. This is, I can't remember what, in the past class, I listed his book there in my previous notes, but in one of his books, this is really introducing these 4 bases here. So number 1, first basis, mere mind. Number 2, interdependence. Number 3, mere objects of knowledge. Number 4, mere subjects of Buddhist discourses. So number 1, what's the first one? Everything is mere mind. Everything's the mind. Everything's how we think and talk about things. So number 1, this first basis rules out the possibility that the division of the two truths has an objective basis. okay? Because it's just mind, it's just perspectives. We're not talking about something outside of the mind here, okay? So, in other words, these distinctions of the true truths are purely a subjective matter of the mind, just a way of looking at things. Two, interdependence here. The division of the two truths is dependent on two minds, the division of two minds. In other words, between ignorance and wisdom. Without these two, there would be no truths. So, two truths themselves, when we talk about deceptive truth or non deceptive truth, conventional and ultimate, the distinction is between two minds. And what are those minds? One is ignorance or falsity, and one is wisdom. That's what the two truths mean, right? That something's deceptive or something's non deceptive or real or true. What's the third one? Third base. All objects of knowledge except ultimate truth are thought concepts or reifications of ignorance. Concepts, phenomena, words, thoughts, not really real, changing, virtual, any of these things with no basis. Hence, conventions, because they change, they're not really real. So, if that's the case, they're just going to reifications of ignorance. They're claiming to be something more than they are. And so, in the big picture, they're not real. And if we take them to be real, which we always do in our everyday life, we're in error or ignorance. It's false, it's fake, right? So ignorance is, conventional reality. Ultimate truth is is transcendent wisdom itself. Okay. So because the division is on mere objects of knowledge, there is no contradiction in that this between, like in a sense, on a where he's basing this is that okay, so division is mere objects of knowledge, so no contradiction in that. The division is mere mind. So this isn't a problem making this division between the two because the division within mind itself. We're not actually making any sort of objective claim on things. This is just within yourself, how you see things. You either see things correctly or incorrectly, right? So there's no problem making that distinction because it's the basis on mind itself. We don't have to objectively try and find out whether that's true or not. It's within yourself. So we can sort that out within ourselves. Are you speaking the truth or are you wrong? Number four, Buddha taught conventional truths just for pedagogical purposes. So according to Gorampa, he taught conventional reality just as a way of meeting you where you're at, right? So for him, none of this is real, but you're stuck in error. So he has to meet you there to be able to teach you what wisdom is. If you know me being snobby and intellectual and with my philosophy background and stuff, I have sort of a little thing where I don't like quoting the Matrix movie because I just somehow think that that's kind of maybe a little vulgar. Anyway, maybe I'm being a snob, but it would be a similar thing in the sense, for Gorampa's point of view, like the first Matrix movie, is the Matrix is fake, right? You have to see that, but what's outside the Matrix is what's real, where you want to go. So you have all those Keanu Reeves is meeting all the other characters there. I can't remember Lawrence Fishburne, like what is he, Morpheus or whatever. They're appearing in the fake world to get you out into the real world. But the point is, the fake world's fake, and that's what you have to realize, right? It's just the Matrix. It's just a computer program, a simulation. It has no reality whatsoever. So the point is, what's really real is them outside in Zion or whatever. They're on that ship underwater. So I can't remember the movie, something like that. And that's what you don't have to wake up to, right? Is transcendent wisdom, transcendent truth. So all four of these things emphasize the subjective nature distinction between the truths. All four are mutually compatible, although number one and number four are the most important because they stress the subjectivity of this whole thing. Okay. Therefore, the ground is not ontological because it's one reality only. The two truths are according to cognitive experience of the cognizer. So everything is mind. You see that in some ways it's a little closer more to the mind only school. I'm not saying that making like a big argument on that, but you can kind of see in the sense that the most important things here is that everything is mind. We're working within the mind. And the ground, there's no ontological ground separate from the mind here. And that a lot like in the mind only school, thoughts, judgments, concepts, and so forth are sort of virtual creations, almost like posits of the imagination. They're not really real. Okay, so for Gorampa, all phenomena are entirely false and deceptive with no grounding in reality. He asserts that the Buddha posited empirically given phenomena as empirical truth for pedagogical or teaching reasons only. Ordinary beings are obsessed with empirical phenomena, and Buddha saw the practical application of empirical phenomena, that's what we do, what we're interested in, what we're obsessed with, so he has to start from there, teach us from there. It is a provisional utility to coax students beyond the phenomenological realm. So he has to sort of coax us out of this fake world that we've actually created ourselves. Okay? So the empirical world in that case is instrumental but not actual truth. Empirical phenomena are entirely false and deceptive according to Gorampa. And between the truths, we can't apply they can't apply to empirical phenomena themselves. What is false and deceptive can't be divided into deceptive and non-deceptive. Here, since ordinary beings' minds are always deluded, mistaken, and erroneous, they falsely experience conventional truth as being true. Conventional truth is only posited in relation to the perspective of ordinary beings. So basically, there's two perspectives here according to Gorampa: sentient beings world, which is fake, and the ultimate truth of the Buddha's or transcendent wisdom, or the real world, so to speak, or the real way of seeing things, right? Okay, that's so the little last line. Since Arya beings or enlightened beings are always non-deluded, non-erroneous, they flawlessly experience ultimate truth, which is the only truth. Sort of the monist view of here is that the two truths basically are just one truth. One's fake, conventional reality, according to sentient beings, this falls away, and then you see ultimate truth as being the thing that's always already been there from the beginning. Okay. However, going back to Tsongkhapa, the key point of Tsongkhapa is the everyday given knowledge consists of dual natures, conventional and ultimate, that form the basis of the objective basis of the two truths. Okay. So, there's a little quote here from Jeffrey Hawkins where he says, there are standards and criteria for valid establishment phenomena such as qualified but are objective. In Gorampa, two truths have no objective basis, just reducible to experience of the cognizer. So basically, Tsongkhapa, this is why they call the Gelugpa tradition kind of quote-unquote quasi-realist, in the sense that the two truths are based in reality, that the mind knowing an object that's quote-unquote separate from it. Whereas Gorampa, it's just within the mind itself. And so it just depends whose experience it is. Is it a sentient being's experience, which is wrong, or is it Buddha's experience, which is right? Okay. Moving on here. I hope this is clear to everybody. I don't want to kind of overdo it and have too much stuff here. So, okay. I've gone over that. Okay. Yeah, just going on more about Tsongkhapa, where he says, I like this. The mode appearances, he says, ultimate and conventional natures are distinct. The mode appearance of ultimate nature is non-deceptive and consistent, like I said before, with its mode of existence, whereas conventional is deceptive and inconsistent with mode of existence. Like I said, from Tsongkhapa's point of view, ultimate nature is true because it is how it is how it appears. Emptiness appears as a void of inherent existence, and that's what it really is. Whereas conventional existence appears as being real, unrelated to anything else, separate from yourself, separate from the mind, but it isn't. Even though it appears that way, it isn't. Ultimately, it's empty. The two truths go together that way. Okay. Okay. And what's interesting as I have here, of course, is that Tsongkhapa's view is unacceptable, Gorampa says, based on this view, because what he's doing is equating ignorance and wisdom. Okay, so the conventional reality is illusion, and emptiness or ultimate reality is reality. So you can see that, like, Tsongkhapa's tying these two together, which is precisely what Gorampa says that you can't do, right? Okay, so question, just sort of finishing up here. How do these relate? How do these then relate? The two conflicting perspectives of ignorance and wisdom here. Okay, so uh, Gorampa basically says these are substantially different, ignorance and wisdom, like the difference between a bed and a jar. They have nothing in common. They're completely separate. Okay, so it's a single identity with distinct conceptual identities, or yeah. So actually, you might just yeah, Gorampa basically makes that distinction here because you can say here, he says that there's different ways that things can exist in sense of being different, right? Um, so basically, things can be substantially different, like a bell in a jar. There can be a single identity with different conceptual identities, like, for instance, impermanence and being conditioned. Things can be co-referential but different in meanings. For instance, things can be different but have the same meaning, right? So let's say he gives the sort of old example of referring to the moon and referring to a cooling effect. So when you look at the moon, traditional medicine, it sort of has cooling energy for your mind. So there are two different meanings here, but they actually refer to the same thing, or a distinction that is incompatible with its oneness, like entity or non-entity. So, like I said before, Gorampa is basically taking the point that these truths are completely distinct, like a bed and a jar. Okay. One thing that was interesting is seeing actually in this is the different lamas, even in the Sakya tradition, in the Kagyu tradition, that are close to Gorampa, but have a different view of it. Like, it's actually, what's interesting is that in the Gelugpa tradition, it's been fairly standardized. Like in terms of Tsongkhapa's position, people. There isn't a lot of variation of interpretation with it. It's fairly standardized. But with Gorampa's position, it's actually a take on founder in the Sakya tradition, Dolpopa, who came sort of before Tsongkhapa. Tsongkhapa was very critical of him. Founded sort of what they call the emptiness of other view, which is, you can see, very close to what Gorampa is saying. So Dolpopa, he makes it substantialized. You don't want to get into that, but I'm just saying, he even says that the two theories being separate are actually ontologically separate, that they're real things and they're separate. It's really, that's even a different position. But what you see with Gorampa is his influence, actually, Dolpopa and Gorampa, people coming after him have even different ways of interpreting that. There's a lot of sort of subtle positions there and interpretations of that word. So just even here, Sakya Pandita, the great Sakya teacher, Randawa, who was Je Tsongkhapa's teacher, Shakya Choden, and Karmapa Mika Dorje, that was the fourth Karmapa, argued the relationship between the truth truths is inexpressible and transcend notions of identity and difference. Conventionally, the relationship is not expressible as identical or distinct. So what's interesting is that in the Sakya tradition, even in the Kagyu tradition, it's maybe almost a little bit more like Zen or something, where you have these great thinkers and scholars and yogis, even breaking down the notion of there being two truths that you can understand intellectually. Like, basically, when we start looking at this, the difference between conventional and ultimate truth, they're so interdependent, but at the same time kind of different, that maybe the whole point's like a matter of faith. The whole point is to let go of trying to figure this out in the first place. Right? It's kind of interesting. So, I mean, you have to do it. You have to have two truths in terms of the teachings, but trying to figure out how they fit together something itself starts to overwhelm you and sort of get past your conceptual mind. Okay, so just finishing up here. Here, I like the question is, and in the book here is, question is, how is conventional truth a truth at all? So basically, if we say that conventional truth is deceptive, or in Gorampa's way, is completely fake or false, how can we call it conventional truth? There's nothing true about it, right? So Tsongkhapa, if conventional truth is false and deceptive, how is it truth at all? How can conventional truth be equal if it's false? So Tsongkhapa, of course, grounds both truths in the dual nature of a single phenomenon, or any object has a conventional ultimate nature, or an ultimate truth. Okay, so these two, in Tsongkhapa's view, two things are mutually entailing. Okay, neither truth can exist without the other. So because of that, he has to demonstrate through equal footing. Okay, so where Tsongkhapa turns to is, of course, the great saint and philosopher and sort of second Buddha, Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna stresses the epistemological and ontological unity of the true truths, which is why Tsongkhapa is always claiming to work out of that tradition, Nagarjuna's tradition here. Okay, and the best way of understanding this relationship is the relationship between dependent arising and emptiness. Okay, in other words, you access ultimate truth in and through empirical or conventional truth. So Nagarjuna says in his work Vigra, I can never pronounce the Sanskrit, Vigra Havya Vartani, which is, quote, where emptiness is possible, there's every function is possible. Wherever emptiness is not possible, there every function is not possible. Okay? And then the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, quote, whatever is dependently arisen is itself explained to be empty. That being dependently designated is itself the middle path. And the other quote is, there is no thing that is not dependently arisen, therefore there's no thing that is not empty. Okay? And Chandra Curry, giving the famous saint, commenting on Nagarjuna, says one of the best ways of understanding the relationship between dependent arising and emptiness is understanding the causal efficacy of empty phenomena itself. In other words, when we look at how things dependently arise in and through causality, we understand that for them to arise, for causality to work, they can't have a separate existence. They have to be in a relationship, so they have to be empty, right? The very fact that things do work and are functioning and things are changing, we run around doing things, shows that they're in relationships, which means shows by nature that they're empty, which is how the two truths go together. Pardon me. Okay, so Tsongkhapa says emptiness, dependent arising, are incoherent unless they're applied to each other, that they only make sense as sort of mutually entailing this way. Okay, I have here empty phenomena is expressed negatively. It isn't a negative in a metaphysical sense. It's not equivalent to no thingness. Although empty phenomena appears to cognize in conscious negativity without positive affirmation, is equivalent to the relational dependent of arisen phenomena seen in different light. So, Tsongkhapa says realization of phenomena is dependently arisen is necessary condition for realization of both truths. So basically, that's what, and I have here. So Tsongkhapa says the best way to understand the relationship of the two truths is use the analogy of dependent arising phenomena. Whether it's just like I always, the classic case given is that how does a seed turn into a plant? It's a whole bunch of different factors other than itself, separate from itself, but nevertheless related to itself, that allow sort of the flower to grow out of the seed, let's say, right? That's only possible because things are empty or sort of interrelated together that way. And so the emptiness we find through the conventional object. In other words, its empty natures we find out through its empirical nature. In other words, that it's empty we see just in how a sprout or a seed works, right? Emptiness isn't something separate, and emptiness or ultimate truth guarantees that the seed works to become a flower in the first place. So the soteriological or sort of liberation consequence in ontological and epistemological issues here, purpose is total enlightenment realized in two bodies of Buddha which depend upon realizing the two truths. So Tsongkhapa says that basically why we have to learn this is that to become a Buddha, Buddha has an omniscient mind meditating in emptiness and an empirical basically body, which is the enjoyment or beatific or angelic body, and the Nirmanakaya emanation body. Those things, it basically go together. The sort of Rupakaya of the Buddha, or basically the fact that the Buddha manifests in different forms to teach emptiness in different sort of angelic bodies, is the dependent arising of a Buddha's nature. But that's only possible in and through the fact that a Buddha's bodies are empty, but also that the Buddha is meditating on emptiness at the same time. So what Tsongkhapa was saying is that enlightenment, escaping samsara, escaping the organic situation we're in, where we are born, we start to age, get sick, suffer, and die, to get off that wheel and to become an angelic Buddha that is basically immortal and deathless and is compassionate and basically teaching emptiness, or this whole path to all sentient beings to allow them to self-liberate. That only works by understanding the two truths, by seeing dependent arising, by seeing that things are, the conventional nature of things and its ultimate nature go together. That basically that's the heart of what it means to be enlightenment. That's to be enlightened. That's the heart of what it means to be a Buddha. Dependent arising and emptiness of a Buddha's body and mind being realizing emptiness and appearing as all different forms or manifestations to teach this same thing, and all of that being possible because of karma or dependent arising and emptiness. That's why we need, Tsongkhapa says, this is what the path is, the unity of karma and emptiness, and why we have to understand it, realize it, and teach others, right? That's why this isn't just doing philosophy. There's therapeutic, soteriological, or liberation quality to these teachings. That's the only reason we're doing them, and that's the ultimate effect we're trying to produce here. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've sort of mentioned that before here. Yeah, so it's just conventional reality, according to Tsongkhapa, deceives those who haven't understood what it really is, how its empty nature here. The difference between knowledge and conventional truth and ordinary experience of it. So there's a great analogy here, a little quote by Bodhidharma, of course, founded Chan or Zen, and was also Padma Sangye, and sort of the founder of the Chid teachings. That was a teacher of a great female Tibetan saint, actually Labdron, so very close to my heart, Daruma or Bodhidharma, said the meaning of the true truths is like the simmering of heated air. So he's trying to give an analogy of how to understand the two truths here. So let's say it's really hot and humid out. And Bodhidharma says deluded people see the shimmering of it and think it's water, but really it's just heated air. So in other words, like a mirage. Like you're sort of thinking you're seeing something or whatever, and you think that it's water or something real, but it's just heated air. So things appear to be real, but really they're not. And that's what allows them to function as real things. Okay, yeah. So this is why Tsongkhapa says we can, just like Chandrakirti, Buddha Palita, all these things, is that we, the understanding conventional reality is important in order to have conformity with worldly conventions. Illusions are real in the ordinary sense, despite being false and deceptive. So we have to keep conventional reality here as Buddhists in order to live, in order to, and even to practice Buddhism itself. We have to have conventional truths. They have to work even though that they're illusory, because it allows us in and through them to realize their ultimate nature, emptiness, and liberate ourselves, right? Okay, so that's the importance, Jason Tsongkhapa is saying, of having the unity of the two truths, and the importance that even though conventional truths are false when we really look for them, that they appear to be one way, but really they're not, they're another, they're false and deceptive. They're also pragmatically or instrumentally useful, that they actually have effects, that we can use them. And because of that, we actually have a path to get enlightened. We can actually use empirical truth to see its emptiness, its own self-liberation, so to speak, right? So going back just to Gorampa one more time, his take on it, of course, being the opposite, which is what is true and deceptive can't be true, okay? So we can't divide truth into two. Basically, there's only one truth, and that's nirvana. Because basically, the distinction is almost like a false distinction, the distinction between ignorance and wisdom, or what's true and what's false. So in the big picture, there's only one thing, not true things, and that's truth, ultimate truth, or wisdom. So Gorampa, rather than trying to maintain the importance of conventional reality, is sort of pragmatic efficacy, or sort of the usefulness of karma, so to speak, or realness of karma. He rejects the authority of conventional truth by treating it as a projection of the conventional mind, and therefore the ignorance of ordinary beings. So conventional truth is true only from the perspective of ordinary sentient and deluded beings. In other words, ignorance. It is truth that's just projection and taken for granted, but really is false or fake. So defining the characteristic of conventional truth is the appearance of non-existent objects. So there's a pedagogical significance here for conventional truth. It's expedient to cultivate ultimate truth. Means it's only a stepping stone. You use the Wittgensteinian line. It's the ladder you use to get up the wall and get over it. But the fact is, once you get to the top, you see that it was never there to begin with. It's kind of like an illusory ladder you use to get up. Sometimes you get this in little myths or like stories where there's like maybe like a magic carpet or a magic thing that you're on that allows you to travel and kind of drops you off and disappears. It kind of wasn't there at all in the first place, and you're kind of at your final destination here. Okay, so yeah. So that's, I guess, the big difference between the two here is that ultimate truth is the soul truth, but not truly established phenomena. Anyway, yeah, so that's sort of like Gorampa's position here, whereas Tsongkhapa, both truths are actual truths, therefore non-paradoxical, mutually entailing, and non-hierarchical relationship between them. So that's what's interesting with J. Tsongkhapa is they go together, the non-hierarchical, not one's better than the other. One's false, once we see from an ultimate point of view, but from a conventional point of view, still looks true. They go together, mutually entailing, whereas Gorampa, ultimate truth is the only truth. So there's a hierarchical, paradoxical and contradictory relationship between these two truths. One's real and more important than the other. How do they go together? Well, this is sort of paradoxical, contradictory. So what you get from Gorampa's point is almost like a Zen view that this relationship is kind of like a paradox or a funny thing. Or kind of an illogical point of view. So even the path, Buddhism in a lot of ways ends up becoming an illogical thing, almost like Zen will teach you, that it's not something we can, you'll see that in a lot of ways, just to finish up, there's a big difference here between a gradual path that J. Tsongkhapa is promoting in terms of long rim, that conventional truths have a truth about them, even in the big picture they're false. So we can talk about a linear, staged, walking up the hill way to get to enlightenment, that we can trust karma, we can trust the path. And Gorampa saying more of what they call discovery mode, where the path itself is illogical because we can't ultimately trust conventions or words or ideas because they don't refer to anything. We have to sort of let them go or see in and through them, or sort of like a koan, sort of break through them, explode through your conceptual mind and see ultimate truth, which is pure wisdom and non-conceptual. So that's, and again, I always, more like Hegel, am suspicious of opposition. So I like, even when people talk, oh, Tibetan Buddhism is the discovery model, and then the gradual sort of staged model, sort of divided model here. That itself to me is suspicious. I'm always like, you don't have, because really when you see with practice, as you progress along the path, you start to see the interdependence of these two opposing views. But that's another story entirely. But anyway, there we go. Let's just finish it up today. I know it's a lot of information. I've just been talking for about 45 minutes here. But this is, in a lot of ways, the crux of the book. So this is the most important position we're doing here in terms of the distinction between these two different scholars and how they see things. So some of the other four chapters of the book are a little bit shorter, a little bit less to say in some ways, so we can have a little bit shorter classes after this. But there you go, two amazing different ways of looking at emptiness, and two very interesting, efficacious ways of understanding emptiness and the spiritual path. Okay, so let's dedicate this. May this be, of course, number one, be the cause for the liberation of all sentient beings. May all beings be liberated through these teachings. And number two, may this be our study and practice here, increase our own understanding of emptiness, that we be liberated. Blessings of all holy beings, truth of karma, power of our pure spirit intention, bodhicitta, and all of our dharma wishes be fulfilled. Okay, see you next time. Thanks so much.